morning. It's 5:30. It's 5:30 PM on Wednesday, January 31st, 2024. And this meeting is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. Tonight, the Sandpoint City Council is meeting in a joint session with representatives of the West Side Fire District, the Sago Fire District Boards of Commissioners, and the Firefighter Union International Association of Firefighters Local 2319 for a work session on the Joint Powers Agreement, or JPA, for the coordinated cooperative provision of fire services in the city of Sandpoint, Sago Fire District, and West Side Fire District. Please note that there will be no decisions made during this evening's meeting. This is a work session only. As noted on the agenda, members of the public will have an opportunity to comment towards the end of the meeting. Members of the public who wish to comment need to please complete a comment sign-up sheet located on the table by the door and hand it to the clerk at the front of the room. For the record, I am Mayor Jeremy Grimm. Also present are Sandpoint City Council President Jason Welker, Councilors Deb Rule, Joel Espiro, Justin Dick, Kyle Schreiber, and Pam Duquette. Also in attendance are the Fire Chief Gavin Gilchrist, City Financial Director Sarah Linz, and City Human Resources Risk Manager Isis Elson. At this time, I would like to invite the chair of each of the fire district boards to introduce themselves and conduct a roll call for each of their boards, and for the union representative to also introduce themselves. Let's start with West Side, since you're right.
Ken Deck, West Side Fire Commission. Roll call for West Side.
Commissioner Lothian here.
Commissioner Heisterkamp here.
Thank you.
We represent the Sago Fire District. Our chairman's not here, but I'm Gary Supiger.
I'm Richard Townsend. Geraldine and Jim Woodward, from what I understand, will be joining us shortly.
Excellent, excellent. And from the,
Clint Frank, president of the Local 2319, captain of the fire department.
Kevin Morbietta.
Camille Toussaint.
Engineer Troy Bedell.
excellent. At this time, before we proceed, if everyone will please rise, I'll lead us in the, actually, I'll ask Chief Gilchrist to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we'll have an opportunity for presentations and remarks as outlined on the agenda. We'll begin with the union representatives, then West Side Fire District, then Sago Fire District, and finally the city of Sandpoint. I guess I wanted to say that this is, an open table discussion. No decisions have been made. I have an open mind, but I will say that I'm approaching this as a fiduciary responsibility party for the city of Sandpoint taxpayers. And I will be asking some questions that I hope our council will also fill in on, allow us to understand one another's positions and, come to some, outcome here that's going to work for everyone. So with that, I'd just like the record to reflect that Geraldine Lewis has arrived at the meeting.
Thanks.
With that, Mr. Frank, if you'd like to proceed and sort of just, I think for the perspective here, help inform us anything you want regarding JPA.
All right, thank you, Mayor Grimm. Before I start, anything you'd like to add before I get going? Chief Soldier? No. Okay. All right, I appreciate all the parties coming together for a workshop tonight. Like Mayor Grimm said, I think it's just to get good ideas on the table, have some good discussion, figure out the strengths and weaknesses. So I'm going to just kind of speak on behalf of the strengths, what we've seen as the firefighting group. They haven't changed from our last meeting. They're still the same. And really the biggest one is our 911 emergency response plans. You all have this outline in front of you. If you didn't grab one, public at large, we have a couple extra forms up there. It should just look like this. Anyway, obviously our local supports the JPA because this is what it has to offer. We spent a lot of time building these response plans because we were 3 small departments. That's why we came together, so we could provide better service. And back 10 years ago is when Sandpoint and Sago came together as a JPA, and then West Side, I think, joined 8 years ago. So we collectively been at it for quite a bit. And the reason why is we're better together rather than apart. Our outcomes are better on scene. We get more immediate resources on scene. Just think of this, when you have let's say a structure fire at your house, do you want 2 firefighters with 1 engine showing up, or would you rather have 3 or 4 engines with 6 to 8 firefighters? It's just, you can do more with more engines, more equipment, and more personnel on scene immediately, rather than waiting to call mutual aid. It's just a delayed form of response. That's how I started my career 22 years ago. I saw how it works. Like, we're not ready to send another apparatus out until we have coverage in the city. I started out with the Sandpoint group. Since this is formed, I've seen the direct benefits of providing better response that's coordinated through 911 call center. We don't have to, as captains, put out mutual aid requests right away. We know that we have 3 engines coming immediately. If we feel like it's going to be a larger call, we'll definitely call their neighbors north side, who I'd like to see the chief just has brought up the idea of automatic aid, and that's something we can talk about as the workshop develops. Another huge thing is our annual training. The fact that you train together, so you're all on the same page, also leads to way better outcomes. We have an annual training plan that's coordinated by our deputy chief right there, but it was coordinated by battalion chiefs ahead of that. And it just makes sure everyone's on the same page, meeting all the national fire protection standards, and they're meeting the hours that's required. If you don't train together, as you all know, your businesses don't run as well. Like, if you don't have a workshop or a meeting with your crews about, hey, what the mission, the vision of how to basically just provide the best service, let's say in the restaurant industry, provide the best emergency response in our industry, outcomes aren't as good. So strong belief in training to make sure that we're all on the same page ahead of time before actually a call significance happens. A huge one is also reduction of insurance. This was created specifically by the JPA. Sandpoint went from an ISO rating of a 4, went down to a 3. So this has direct benefits to all business owners. Obviously, Sandpoint's a kind of high value district just because it's our urban center along with Ponderay in the area. So there's got to be value given to that. Not recognizing that, appreciating the work that the firefighters put in by inspecting every business in the city limits. And this was led by Fire Chief Ron Stocking at the time. And with the JPA coming on board, having residents, the Dover station, having immediate response from Sagal, that all led to a reduction in insurance. I don't know what would happen if we decided to split and go our separate ways to smaller departments. I do believe that insurance rating, once they looked at that, would probably go back to the old rate. And I'd hate to have that be passed on to our business owners and to our homeowners. I'm going to go ahead because I didn't want to speak the entire time. Obviously, I brought our crews in here who have been part of the department for many years. I think Kevin Morbietta has been with the department how many years? Lots. So 24 year member. Troy's about the same. And Tennille is a newer member, but she joined this department because she saw the success we could accomplish as a team and operating as one department rather than 3. I think you've been here about 6 or 7 years.
Full-time, and I was a volunteer before that, so about 10 total.
Cool. So anyway, I'm gonna hand the floor over to Troy. He's gonna talk a little bit about the importance of basically equipment and standardizing what it means.
Okay.
Yes.
So one of the things that, just to give you a little bit of the history, is before we became one agency, each agency could have different equipment that when you get on an incident could hinder or help the situation, depending. One of those big examples is our air packs. One of the things that we've done in the last years or so, excuse me, is we have been able to standardize and get a grant all for one type of air packs, because not all air packs are interchangeable. So with that being a key element, now when we're on an incident, we don't have to say, oh, this is your air pack, this is our air pack. Oh, and they don't interswap. Now they all do, and it's just one little step that just saves time and energy and whatnot. Another thing is being familiar with the apparatus. When we are able to cross-train and work at different stations, we're able to be familiar with these pieces of if it's a chainsaw, if it's a fire engine, you name it, any of those pieces of equipment, because we're cross-trained and we all work together, we're able to get our hands on these things and really just, it's that muscle memory we're developing, working together as a group. Whereas before, when it was just Sagal on the south side of the bridge, we loved our brothers, but we didn't really train with them. And so it was one of those things that was like, well, it'll work, but it's just not as cohesion as it is now. And having seen both sides, I can tell you going back would be, well, it's just, in my opinion, it's just not worth it. So. All right.
All right, thanks, Troy. So that was a bit on just standardized of equipment throughout the department. Obviously, we made some strides that way. Kevin's gonna talk a little bit about just shared administration, our SOGs, and I know the Fitch study, which is a study that we paid an outside agency to come in to find out if this was a good agreement or not, will probably be discussed. So Kevin's kind of our expert on that. Or not expert. I don't know if anyone's an expert when you have a 50-page manual with a bunch of numbers, but he's read it more than I have, so.
So as far as, I was kind of same thing with Troy is, obviously we've been going on, I don't know, close to a decade now of doing the Selkirk fire. And so obviously, part of the benefit is we regionalized our SOPs and policies and procedures. A very daunting task to get 3 agencies on the same page. And of course, now they all need updated again. So that is something that's on our, with work with Chief Gilcrease, that it's on, we all know that they need updated. And so that's part of the next process is if we continue forward to start addressing some of those issues. That allowed us by consolidating our SOGs and rules and regs, it basically put us all on the same page. We're tactically more efficient. The daily life at the stations are more efficient. We're operating the same, that you can take a person from working down in Sagal, put them in Sandpoint, and all of our policies and procedures and SOGs are all the same. So we've had a lot of success doing that. We did take a step backwards and not continue on with Selkirk Fire. Each agency will eventually be adopting their own, making their own tweaks. They will have different tactical benchmarks than they will on scene. They'll be adopting different lingo when we're on scene, depending on the administrator that comes through for making those changes. So that is, seems like a simple thing, just putting everyone on SOGs and rules and regs are the same, but for our job and the safety of our job and our crew and stuff, it's been just extremely beneficial to have that. It's worked out well. And you want me to talk about the fish study now?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have a lot on the fish study. I'm not an expert on the fish study. Obviously, when that process came through, we worked hand in hand with Steve. We had social hour every night with Steve. He was basically the lead guy who came up and did the study. And so we had some fairly significant contact with him. And, he provided us with a lot of information off the table and on the table when it came to that study. So keeping in mind on that study, which I've heard people talk about the study and want to utilize the study for going forward and some of its recommendation. Keep in mind that is a second revision. The preliminary study came out and most people aren't privy to that. I have tried to get a copy of it. I've reached out to Steve and a few other people to see who has the original Fitch study. And I just haven't been successful in getting that. So the original preliminary one that came out identified the Joint Powers Authority as being one of the go-to. They gave us basically 3 or 4 different recommendations of how they felt we should proceed. I don't have them in front of me right now, but obviously I'm an advocate of the Joint Powers Authority. That's what I want this agency to move forward to. That part was removed from the study. People didn't, if it was, how did he explain it? If it was too complicated or cumbersome of a thought process, that the district in the city had the ability to remove that from the study. And so that's what took place. So I just want to keep people aware of that when you are referencing the study. The study was tweaked by the JPA board. And so I'm still pushing for a joint powers authority. You're just not going to see that in the document. And we, and I will continue to try to get that document. Hopefully he'll call me back this week so that I can provide the council and the district commissioners the original form with some of the potentials of being a joint powers authority versus a joint powers agreement. I think we all can agree here that, the joint powers agreement is a tad bit cumbersome right now and has its challenges. Whereas I think we can probably fix some of that by moving forward with the joint powers authorities. I got on that.
All right, hey, thanks, Kevin. And then our public outreach is gonna be led by Tennille. She kind of is our main coordinator for the department, so she'll just talk about the strengths of that.
Yep, so like Captain Frank said, I am in charge of our public education and outreach. And the JPA has kind of been instrumental in that because we can now order our supplies in bulk instead of each individual department, doing their own thing. Last year, we went out to the schools, 44 presentations were made, 1,300 elementary students were reached. We can kind of streamline our delivery process. Our social media campaigns can be streamlined, not only in the city, but all over our district as well. We have a residential smoke alarm program for no cost for anybody that needs them. Our goal is to get smoke detectors in every home. So that's another benefit that we can order those and get them throughout the district as well. We also have a car seat safety program that began here, but it's another benefit to the JPA and to anybody in the community that we serve. We also have done some pre-incident planning with the Department of Lands. We call them WUI events or Wildland Urban Interface. If you think back to last summer with all the wildfires in Spokane, we have wildland and structures that are threatened and burning. We have potential. A lot of our district is those types of areas. As we know, we have pretty low snowpack right now. So doing some of those trainings as a community is beneficial and it's safer for everybody involved. And I think, just also our fire prevention goes into our building inspections. We can kind of standardize those and as a department wide, looking, our goal is safety, our sprinkler systems being, serviced, smoke detectors, are they up? Fire extinguishers, are those active? So as a department, we have kind of streamlined that process and we do those annually, every business. So that's another benefit of safety, public education and outreach due to the JPA. That's it.
Thanks, Dale. So obviously you can tell from our side of the table, we believe that we're stronger together rather than apart. Those are just some of the examples. We keep hearing the words, and I was actually happy to hear this, Sarah, at the last GPA meeting, you used, I think, Geraldine used the word cumbersome. You said, no, that's just a word that's been thrown out, which is, I was happy to hear, because if there's some better ways to do billing or to share expenses, we're not the experts on that. We're the experts on providing the service in the field. That's why we are firefighters. That's why we are sitting on the side of the table. We'd love to make the administration flow better and work better and have less billing. It seems cumbersome to us. That's why we came up with that word. And I've heard it from the past city administrator. I've heard it from the chief's office before, because it seems cumbersome. It seems like, why all this cross billing when we can just run as one agency, like Kevin said, as a joint powers authority, which was the intention when the Fitch study was done. And we can have the chiefs manage the fire department fiscally, administratively, and operationally. because that's why you hired them to do that. We'll provide the service, and that's what we just talked about, some of the services we currently provide together. I think the service will suffer if we decide to separate the three smaller agencies. Even if we went back to automatic aid, if that, and I'm glad to see we're making those steps to maybe go that direction. You just don't have that same cohesion by training together, living together and working side by side when you're three separate departments. It's just that simple. And really in the agreement itself, it says coordinated and cooperative. So I think the agreement itself explains it. I just think we need to find a better way to do the financial part, so the chiefs can focus more on operations, vision, leadership, and strategic plans. And the crews can just be supported in the field. So that's all we got.
Thanks, Clint. Is there anyone on the city council or otherwise at the table who has questions for the union representatives? At this time, we can circle back at the end, but. Right, well, thanks, appreciate that perspective and thanks for all you do to everyone, for sure.
Excuse me, Mayor Graham.
Yeah.
I had one more comment that I left out. Spot, which is a local transportation authority, they currently operate it as an authority currently in our communities. So certainly we can look locally, potentially. I know they're mainly state and federally funded. I know the entities don't pay the same amount of money, but it's the same concept where you pass the money on to the entities to run it. And it seems like I know it's been running since 2011. So it seems like it's been a pretty successful enterprise. Locally, we already have an example that we can look at that's run as an authority. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Clint. Moving on, I'd like to introduce or offer West Side Fire District to just nothing formal or whatever you got, but love to hear your thoughts and perspectives.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the council for providing this opportunity. Quite honestly, I heard about it about 2 weeks ago. I'm not the commissioner that was assigned to the JPA, but I am the alternate. And for the past year and a half that I've been on West Side, I've attended probably the vast majority of the meetings and have not been apprised of this. There's been no workshops or anything else. So I think this is a great first step. To give you a little of my background, I spent 5 years in the U.S. Navy. Upon being discharged from the Navy, I spent 35 years in municipal water, involved in several JPAs. Every one of those JPAs took work to make them successful. Again, I think this is a great first step that I agree with the union to share services can benefit everybody. But if we don't work and lay the issues on the table, how do you know what the issues are and how do you resolve them and make them better? That's my perspective. And again, I look forward when I watched the YouTube video of the council meeting. I'm glad the council put a pause on it and provided this opportunity. We as a commission, there's 3 of us, we can't talk unless we have a public meeting. So we haven't even had an opportunity to sit down in a commission meeting and discuss what's going on. And we would like that opportunity going forward. And I appreciate the fact that the union's willing to kind of put a pause, hit the brakes on the negotiations and other things so we can get these worked out and make it better for the entire community. So that's my side of it.
Well, when I became I'm Guy Lothian, and when I became a commissioner some years ago, the Fitch study had just come out and we were reviewing it. And basically, you know, all the options were on the table. We would separate and operate independently as we had in the past. But it seemed like there was more financial and operational efficiencies to be achieved by continuing the joint powers agreement. And it kind of seemed like a no-brainer to us at the time. And so we voted on our part the last time it came up to continue it. One of the reasons, other than just efficiency, it seemed to be favored by the firefighters, and it seemed to help the morale of the firefighters. And so we thought that we should continue.
Well, my name is Scott Heisterkamp. I am 3 weeks into my
commission election. So I echo Ken's perspective. I spent 24 years in the Air Force and was involved in strategic planning of joint basing between Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Army. The services blended for logistics, base support, finance, personnel, accounting. It started off pushback, particularly from the troops, the younger people who pride in their service. But as it progressed within a year or two, massive economies, the Congress oversaw the financial benefits to this. They saw it all, very productive. And just, I've heard in the 3 weeks, countless explanations and discussions on the benefits of the JPA, the benefits of combining the forces. Haven't heard anything negative or anything that should derail the JPA process. Fully supportive of that and will continue to be so. Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions for West Side from the council or? Geraldine, are you the chair?
Well, I'm the chair of our commissioners, but our JPA representative, Rich Townsend, actually is going to start our conversation, and he had a little,
I just captured kind of our talking points, so.
yeah.
Like to take notes. I wrote them down. So the Sagal fire position, we have most of our commissioners here, so you can hear from them individually as well. Sagal contributes the largest share to the JPA. We are the larger, more spread out district. We do have some more value that we bring to the table. Just on value that we do bring, we've also voted and stepped forward to buy a new engine. We're talking about a levy. We're adding more staff. So the value that we bring is just going to get bigger is the point I want to make with that comment. And just as a county, local areas, we just continue to grow, and it's harder and harder for these rural fire districts to stand on their own. So in our view, it's taken a step backwards to abandon this agreement that's working. There's future steps that I think we'll probably have to take as the population continues to grow. I think Clanton, one of the other firefighters, mentioned an authority versus just an agreement. There's also other districting that we could look at, but again, those are future steps. I think the JPA was a step in the right direction, one we don't want to back away from. And just to reiterate some of the things you also heard, the 911 center, coordinated training, common equipment, they're all beneficial. And backing away from it would cause us to lose that. And just Clint mentioned it already. Sarah made a comment at the JPA meeting that I missed. Geraldine attended for me. I think it's maybe some urban legend that the finance is difficult. So let's just make sure we're talking about what the real issues are today, not the Fitch study's 3 years old. How's it working now, and attack those. And maybe that's not one anymore. So, the last thing I'll say, and I'll let the other two talk. We talked at length about it at our last meeting, and we're unanimous in our support of the JPA, and we think it'd be a mistake to abandon it and lose it.
And Nick Pierce and Jim Woodward are the two representative commissioners who weren't able to be here tonight, but they echoes those same thoughts. And I have to say that you mentioned the financial and operational efficiencies, and like you said, I have yet to hear sort of what the drawbacks are. So far, we hear a lot about the strengths it adds. So on our end, at our meetings, nobody's come forward with drawbacks. One of the questions that we had as commissioners was, in the past, it seemed like there was not equal representation. The meetings were being set and run, and then we would just hear stuff after the fact without having really a sense that the three districts shared equally in the running of those meetings. And so we talked a little bit about, is the what does that JPA chair look like going forward? And I'm not saying I'm coming here with any answers or even suggestions. I'm just saying that was one of the conversations in our smaller group is there a way to make that work a little more effectively so that each of the districts feels like they are at those meetings with a real voice? I agree that I've heard only positive from the firefighters and that it has helped morale and that it helps their sense of working as a team. And I've even seen when we get the reports from chief and we hear that someone is, you know, an engineer's moved from here to here and then this is moved here to here. And it's like there's just a lot more chess pieces on the board for them to work with so that every time there's a dynamic and a shift, there's more people available to put into action where they're needed most. And I think that the drawback of splitting is that you lose that leverage of really having those firefighters at a moment's notice able to be shifted around onto different shifts or stations. I don't know, Gary, do you have anything to add?
I'd just like to say I'm unanimous with my board. We support the current JPA structure. You know, to me, you know, we are three small fire departments, you know, who are united by serving the same community. And we are much stronger together than we are independently. You know, together, you know, we can offer the highest level of service to our communities,
Yeah.
which is what it's all about, the most economical level of service to our communities. You know, you heard all the reasons today. We share apparatus, we share personnel, we share training. We think Chief Gilchrist has done a terrific job of managing the three departments, and he can reassign personnel and apparatus, you know, in a constantly changing environment. You know, when firefighters are off on training or they're on personal leave or sick leave or whatever, you know, he can reassign personnel and apparatus to keep the high level of protection, you know, from throughout the entire community. To me, you know, Sagal has in the last year has made a commitment to grow our district. We're making the biggest investment in the history of our fire district by purchasing a new $800,000 engine, first new engine that's ever been purchased in anybody's recollection in our district. And we're
With
also
help of a grant, which is another thing that the grant writing has been so beneficial when it's benefited everybody. Sorry,
So
Gary.
we're
It's a
getting,
big
we're
grant.
getting a large grant to help support it, but you know, we're also doing with our own resources. And we're gonna we're committed now to doing a levy this fall to add additional personnel, you know, to give a higher level of protection. You know, we've seen in our community in the last 20 years, you know, in spite of all the growth in population and structures in our community, we don't have any more fire protection than we had 20 years ago in terms of personnel and equipment. You know, so we need to right that ship, and we're going to make the effort to do that. And all that would be part of JPA. I believe some of the other fire districts are also considering, you know, adding staff and equipment, which is really needed. Fire protections is a critical need of our community. And, you know, we are much stronger together than we were apart. To me, the city of Sandpoint has the most to gain from the JPA agreement because city of Sandpoint has the highest risk, you know, in terms of structures. You along First Street, you've got wall-to-wall 100-year-old buildings. You know, you've got schools, you've got hospitals, you've got large apartment buildings. You know, you need more resources than you can provide, you know, to an incident. God forbid, you know, something happens. So JPA is beneficial to Sagal, where we're mostly single structures, and Sandpoint and West Side. I just think, you know, it would be crazy, you know, to go backwards. You know, we need to work together to go forward as a community to give the highest level of service to our patrons. Thank you.
Prosecution rests.
Thank you, commissioners, and appreciate all those comments. I think at this point, what I'll do is, I know I have a brief presentation. Let me just first start by asking, any council members have a presentation that you want to make as well?
Not a presentation. Wouldn't mind asking a question of the Sagal commissioners though. Is that all right?
I think my presentation might provoke some additional questions, so it may be.
Sure.
I don't want to steal your thunder or anything.
yeah.
Councilman Wong.
Well, after the other presentations, you asked if we had
Yeah.
questions, so.
Yeah, go for it. I don't want to.
Well, it's about something Gary mentioned. Gary, you discussed the levy you plan to run this fall. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What is your goal for that levy? Who's leading that campaign? Has the campaign
Well,
begun yet?
we're committed to running a levy. You know, we're still undecided exactly the amount, but the levy is going to be for the primary purpose of supporting additional personnel. You know, we need more firefighters in our district to support, you know, the apparatus that we have on order and, you know, the level of protection in our community. So we're going to run a levy for a minimum of 3 additional full-time firefighters, possibly more, and all the equipment it needs to support this additional staff.
Details to come, because it's in early stages of our conversations, but
Sure, just for the record, Chairman Woodward has arrived to the meeting. Sorry, Chairman. Go ahead.
Just the west side is also looking at a levy this fall. Renco only has one person at it right now, and so
Yeah.
we've met, both commissions have met together and trying to do a little bit of coordination, so we're not stepping on each other's toes, and hopefully we can make it a successful levy to get the required personnel we need.
Any other comments? Great, well, let's see, how do I'm going to share my screen. So again, Jeremy Grimm for the record, Mayor of Sandpoint, and I haven't had any conversations with council collectively on this. This is week 3 for me. For context, you know, the city of Sandpoint's facing about $100 million on a wastewater treatment plant, about $25 million on water transmission lines, millions and millions of dollars on our streets and roads, as you're all acutely aware. So when I approach this, I hope I don't offend anyone. I am simply approaching it from the perspective of a fiduciary steward of the Sandpoint taxpayer. I'm asking questions that I would ask running my own business. I'm asking questions that I would ask as a land use planner. And more than anything, the reason I'm putting this out there is because I do sincerely want a genuine discussion so you can understand not only my concerns, but concerns of the fellow council members here. So I want you to take this in the right context, which is these are the questions I have after reading the Fitch report and just come to mind. So I'm just sharing them openly. No council members have seen this. So it's just a couple of kind of questions that pop out to me. The first is, you know, why do we exist as a JPA? Well, clearly we are here because we are 3 independent governing bodies. And I take that pretty seriously. I'm very hesitant to give up any control and authority that the city of Sandpoint municipality has. So we're here. And when I think of that, I have 2 simple questions when I look at the JPA. One, how does it benefit Sandpoint taxpayers? And what does this arrangement do for the city of Sandpoint? I think we're all pretty aware of the geography. If there's some in the audience who are not, we've got West Side in the purple on the upper left. We've got Sandpoint uncolored in the center and Sagal in the south with the yellow. So as a land use planner, geographer, obviously, you know, I look at a map and I say, wow, these are 3 very disparate and diverse types of geographies with different fabrics, different roads, different development patterns. And that's just something that jumps out to me right away. I know that Ting doesn't provide fiber out into some of these areas because there's a diminishing return on investment for every lower level of density that you get as you head into rural areas. So I'm thinking, just my mindset, I'm thinking delivery of services, cost, financing, budget on all this. So when I look at just some of the high level observations from the Fitch study, they're kind of affirming this. Sandpoint does have a distinctively different community population density, road infrastructure and whatnot. Our response times are different. And certainly as a rural area, you're going to have different response times. We benefit from more frequent and concentrated call distribution. And West Side particularly has very, very low call volume, and per that Fitch study provides limited mutual value to the city. So when I look at that summary from the Fitch, this portion here talks about overall the Sandpoint benefits is only marginal, and the shared costs of the administration is just marginal. In other words, there's no substantial financial driver for the city's participation in this. And it says the city would benefit from maintaining an automatic aid relationship with other agencies. So again, I'm just kind of taking it all in. So when we look at staffing and administration, how does it benefit the Sandpoint taxpayers? What does this arrangement do for the city of Sandpoint? So this is not out of Fitch. This is last year's slider totals. Sandpoint slid 70 24-hour days to Sagal. Sandpoint slid 24 24-hour days to West Side. Sagal slid 10 to Sandpoint, and West Side slid 0 to Sandpoint. So, and we can have questions after this. I got a couple more slides, but it just letting you know my thought process. I'm saying it looks, and I could be uninformed, it looks like Sandpoint's sliding a lot of people. I know there's compensation, but it seems like a lot of frenetic, like a duck under the water, moving their feet just to shift people around to get compensated for it, from my perspective. From the city's perspective, we are incredibly thinly staffed. Although we get reimbursement, it does take work to administer the JPA. In fact, I totaled up just the hours this week and last week talking about it with staff that doesn't get reimbursed, and I'm well over $2,000 just, visiting with people about it in person hours. So there is a cost, but it takes up staff capacity. We spend about 20% of our finance full-time employee. Yes, we get reimbursed, but that's still a person, 20% of their annual time is spent managing the JPA. And HR, about 20% of the HR's time is spent managing the JPA. So separate from cost, this is just, we can't even hire the people we need to hire. And these are positions that are losing capacity because of the JPA. So we have a lot of existing projects and deficiencies to address. I won't bore you with my nightmares, but HR is certainly one of them. So I look at demand and response. How does this benefit Sandpoint taxpayers? What does it do for the city of Sandpoint? I'm not an expert fire person like all of you don't claim to be, but I just look at some of the proportionality here. So this is from the Fitch study, the number of incidents by call category. Sagal motor vehicle accidents, you've got about 30% more than we do in Sandpoint. Fire total responses, you got about 30% more than we do in Sandpoint, and canceled wrong call, no incident, you got about 30 to 40% more than we have. No, that's way more than that. A lot more than we have in Sandpoint, 1.6% of calls to almost 6%. So I'm just trying to process and say, what does this look like? From the Fitch study, table 25, there's an allocation of shared costs, really summarizing what the fiscal benefit of this joint powers agreement would be. And I recognize it's not all about money, but money's important. It was pretty clear Sandpoint is a net contributor. We do not benefit based on this financially. We lose an extra $4,100 a year, and I understand why Sagal and Westside, benefit, because they're not only financial benefits.
That's okay.
Is
Keep
there a
going.
call? No. But all the other benefits. So I look at this and say, well, doesn't appear to be a direct financial benefit. When I look at table 71, 63, and 67, to the right is the total fire-related calls and average calls per day by month for Sandpoint. So we're averaging 1 call per day. When we look at Sagal, 0.8 or 20% less calls per day. And when I look at West Side, 0.1 call per day, 90% less. And we all know that fewer calls is a greater cost per call because we're staffing and we have the equipment. So again, I'm just trying to understand the benefit fiscally for Sandpoint. And then finally, when I look at the total responses by busy time per unit, Sandpoint, 1,260 responses at 538 hours, about 0.42 hours per call. Sagal, 0.78 hours per call, and Westside, 1.14 hours per call. So I'm saying, well, that makes sense because you're spread out, you're more rural. It's going to take you longer to get to and from and deal with an incident. But again, it seems like Sandpoint delivers fire services far more efficiently than any rural district can do. So with that, I just, in full transparency, these are just the questions that come at me. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just asking those 2 questions. What does it do for our taxpayers and what does it do for Sandpoint? And happy to discuss that. I think I'd like to just start that discussion with council members. If you want to add anything.
I would just ask how they obviously want to help. How would you make up for the loss you see in Sandpoint? If they're running a levy for more manpower, that's gonna help. If she said that it's not cumbersome, how would we help human resources? If this is a discussion to make it whole and work, how? That's what I would want to know, is give them a chance to share how they would approach those issues that you pointed out.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to go around the council and then kind of take some collective feedback, and I think that's the most efficient way to handle it. Any other council members have comments, questions, or perspectives?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, your presentation touched on a lot of the things that jumped out to me from the Fitch report. The 2023 slider count has been a concern of mine since I learned of those numbers. It's a 9.5 to 1 ratio in terms of how many hours Sandpoint firefighters are being sent to Sagal versus how many hours Sagal firefighters are being sent to Sandpoint. Of course, you're being financially compensated for that, but seems like an opportunity cost in human resources that we're making up for deficiencies in staffing down in Sagal. The HR time, I've heard from our HR team that it's closer to 35% of our HR time that's being allocated towards JPA human resources right now. So again, it comes down to, we can look at the flow of dollars, but there's the opportunity cost in terms of how our staff time is being really consumed by administering the joint powers agreement. And I've heard advocates of the JPA argue that the solution to that is to take it out of cities' hands and form an authority, but it's been 10 years and I haven't seen that effort truly progress yet. So, and I'm also, it gives me pause and hesitation to hand over $1.2 million of Sandpoint taxpayer dollars to an authority over which city council has no authority. That's quite a step up from the spot bus, for which I think spend about $90,000 a year. So those are some of my observations, and I thought your presentation covered the concerns I had from the Fitch study as well. Thank you.
Council members?
No, go ahead.
So, similar concerns to, Councilman Walker. I've been here since the beginning of the JPA. I don't know if any of you went back and watched the last time we voted on this, but I'll just be honest with y'all. I was a no vote then. Because I saw a lot of these same things, and I've been waiting a long time for fire to step up and make it happen and move forward with the authority. And here we are yet again in another discussion. And although I agree with a lot of what is said and things may run better, I don't think there are a ton of benefits for Sandpoint. If a functioning joint powers authority could occur, then somebody needs to get out of the gate and start running, because it's been quite a long time. I would have questions for fire in that a lot of the things you discussed about training, responding together. It seems like now, because we've been doing this for quite some time, that those things are all better. Maybe I'm naive, but I believe that the way fire has been presented to me, as has been other individuals with military background, or let's say police, that you guys all work hard as a family, makes sense to me. Even in my profession, I can reach out to other physical therapists and get questions answered. So to me, it seems like if you guys are all updating your operation manuals and each department is doing it, then maybe there's time within your schedules that still happens as a group. But do you need to be Selkirk Fire to do that? I don't know that you need to be. I mean, I think you need to get better at reaching across the aisle to make a lot of those things that make your overall morale better. I think there doesn't necessarily need to be a JPA to continue those things, because they're already in place. And so it's in a lot of ways up to you to maintain those things that you think work very well in, responding. And Chief has already talked about more automatic response. So I guess I would put that to you as to, is there absolutely a reason that you couldn't continue on some level to have a monthly or quarterly trainings together and keep everybody's operational manuals looking the same?
Can I respond to that?
If you don't mind, I'm getting these questions down, and I'd just love to hear, we can get all the council questions out, and then I absolutely want to hear back from everyone who's here and the public, so absolutely. Councilman Dick.
Thank you. Hey, thank you, everybody, for coming as well, too. This was a very unique opportunity to get everybody in the room. Thank you to the union for being flexible on the collective bargaining agreement as well. Thank you to the staff for your additional time that you've put in, and for the council and everybody who showed up from Westside and Sagal. I certainly have the same concerns for the taxpayers, and looking at roughly 1,680 hours man and woman power that have come from Sandpoint to Sagal. I guess I'd like to understand a little more on a deeper dive, trying to find out what those slider numbers look like from 2020, 21, 22. We really don't have that information right now. Was 2023 an outlier? Why do we have the absenteeism, I guess, at that particular station for that year? Does that have to do with time off, cat time, medical time as well? Because I'm sure we're going to run into those types of things. It's been really great to hear the staff discuss the importance and the benefits of this, as well as Westside and Sagal. Obviously, there's something here, right? It does seem to work to some regard. We do have some challenges that seem like there's a potential that they could be worked through, at least from my seat. From the Fitch study, when looking through at the recommendations, there was 3 recommendations: the dissolution of the JPA, we continue as we are right now, or the expansion of the JPA. With the expansion, I'd like to do a little more discussion about the authority and what that may ultimately look like. Is that a realistic thing that we could get? If we were going to expand it, where is Northside in this conversation as well? Why are they not currently participating in the JPA? Is there an opportunity for Northside to participate in the JPA as well? I think if we're going to be adding more folks, I was very glad to hear about the levies that we're potentially going after. I'd like to know more as those come up. I know not everybody is prepared to discuss those and how they're going to be handled. I certainly think that's a big step if we are to continue something along these lines as well. That's pretty much what I have, though. Besides, I concur with a lot of the counselors, and thank you, Mayor, for your presentation.
Thank you, Councilman Dick. Other council
Yeah,
members?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schreiber?
Yeah, so one of the questions that I had was about the graph you showed that I think Segal disputed that we actually spend more money. My understanding is that we do get a little bit of cost savings in the shared efficiency of administrative expenses. And perhaps that could be done better, but I think that I would like to see the numbers on that as well, because it seems to me that there's probably some efficiency there. I think that Commissioner Suppiger made a good point that perhaps we can handle our own day-to-day operations pretty well by ourselves in Sandpoint because of our geographic and density advantages, but we do have the biggest potential for multi-structure fires that would take all hands on deck. And so, I'm also 3 weeks on the job here. And so I would like to hear from the experts what the difference between the automatic or mutual aid agreements would be from what we have now and what we would be giving up in terms of moving away from JPA and towards those automatic aid agreements. I don't have any firefighting or military background, but I get out in the backcountry and do some skiing pretty often, and I always expect my partners to have the same avalanche training and medical training that I have. And most people that engage in that sport do, but yet we still get together and practice those skills on a regular basis, because in those extreme circumstances, you don't know how somebody's gonna react unless you have trained with them on a regular basis and know that they are going to be on the same page with you. So I see that argument as well, that there is some efficiency that's not quantifiable on a balance sheet, that not just knowing who lives next door, but actually getting together with them on a regular basis.
Excellent. And Madam Clerk, is Councilman Aspiro joining us remotely?
Yes, I'm right here, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear
Hi,
me?
Councilman. Yes, how are you?
Is it too loud or is it okay?
Perfect. Sound like you're right in the room.
Perfect. Yeah, I apologize that I wasn't able to be there tonight. I got 4 kiddos in the other room, wasn't able to get a sitter. My wife's gone, so appreciate your guys' patience. And Mr. Mayor, your presentation had a lot of my questions, so I really appreciate that presentation. And a note, I just want to echo a concern that I had with, I think Councilman Welker mentioned with our staff timing with all of this. So I look forward to hearing, I don't know if the rebuttal is the right word from the other fire districts, but I'd like to hear, I look forward to hearing your guys' responses to our concerns. So appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Aspiro. So with that, I've got a few questions. I think it's best just to throw it out and sort of have a family discussion on this stuff, right? And starting from the top there, so the slider issue, help at least me and maybe other people understand, put it yourself in my chair. Why is this not a concern for Sandpoint, this slider?
Can I ask
Because you're being paid for it.
Councilman
Lothian.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, yep, okay.
And I have a question. I actually think it's probably best answered by chief, deputy chief, and firefighters themselves. We understand that all the employees are Sandpoint employees, all the firefighters, and we're just subcontracting them from you. So it's not like you have a pool of employees and we have a pool of employees and you just keep giving us yours. We're actually just paying you for firefighters, if I understand it in complete layman's terms. And that's why I'm like, maybe explain, because you're talking about, hey, we're giving you firefighters 70 times, you're only giving us 10. And I'm like, wait a minute, these are all your employees. We're just paying you for employees. So I don't understand the term as it's being used. And do you mind if?
Sure, if you don't mind me just calling on folks, I think make it run.
Yes, however. it can
Unlike
get
across the street.
Yeah.
I had actually put it under public, so I apologize. I had something to read under public, but I just wanted to talk about the slider thing. Okay. And this is, I'm the new guy in the room, been here 6 months.
Name?
Jeff Armstrong, Deputy Fire Chief.
Okay, Jeff.
if I take Troy, who's assigned to Sandpoint, and I send him down to Sagal, Sagal should be paying for his salary for that 24 or 48 hours. We don't backfill Troy's position, that should be a net positive to the city in the budget.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Council.
So, Deputy Chief Armstrong, what impact does that have on the Sandpoint Station's staffing levels, though? Is somebody called in to fill that vacancy at Sandpoint, or are we just brought down to minimum staffing, thereby potentially, I mentioned the opportunity cost. Of course, the money flows our direction, but we're now down to 2 instead of 3 or 3 instead of 4 at the Sandpoint Station, potentially reducing the level of service in Sandpoint. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You are absolutely correct, in the same way as if Troy took a day on vacation, we would drop down to 2.
Yeah.
Because we have constant staffing. Sandpoint.
Are we experiencing minimum staffing more frequently because we slide firefighters to Sagal?
I would have to refer to Kevin, who handles the schedule a lot more than.
On the slider, we don't have to slide. That's administrative choice to slide. I don't advocate sliding. I don't think we should slide. What you're charging is halftime when you slide someone. You're not charging overtime. So when I take Troy and I slide him over, the district is paying Troy halftime, paying the bill to the city of Sandpoint of halftime. That's all you're saving is halftime, not a straight salary or hourly wage, not an overtime. It's a halftime. I think every agency should be able to, if in the west side area, someone takes a day off, pay overtime. Fill that position. All they're saving is halftime by not paying overtime. Same with Sagal. If Sagal takes a day off, pay overtime instead of giving the city a bill for halftime. I think it's crazy. I think we have the ability with our, we're saving some money on the halftime. That's how I explain. Well, every penny helps. It does. I would rather pay the overtime and have more people on per day than sliding people all the time. That's what I advocate. That might be different from how the administration feels about it. But I don't advocate sliding. And I think it'd be fixed.
Can you speak to I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's, the,
Acutely aware of process and order.
Out the window.
well, I just want to expand on different ranks and that causes problems with cost. So can you speak to that?
As far as who works for who? Is that what you mean? Like, if different ranks working for, yeah, so obviously how our department works, we have captains and we have engineers. If a captain takes a day off, we try to fill that overtime position with a captain. If no captains take it, then we go to what's called a swing up engineer. Swing up captain. So it's an engineer who's certified to work as a captain, and then we'll fill that position with that person. It's cost neutral, right? Because he's getting swing up pay or she's getting swing up pay for that, so it doesn't work. Now, the opposite works as well. So if you're an engineer and you take a day off, it goes out to engineers first to fill it. If no engineers fill it, then it goes out to captains to fill. If a captain takes that position, you are paying more for the captain to work that overtime shift than if an engineer took that overtime shift. If nobody takes it, then it goes out to force hire, which we have a lot of those lately. And the force hire is you force hire an engineer, not a captain for that position. So it works either way, if that makes sense.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
do you mind defining force fire? Or
Force hire?
Sorry, and explaining what that is?
Sure. So normally when someone has a day off and you're going to go out to overtime and find someone who is willing to work that shift for overtime on their day off, we have a process, certain number of hours that we go through to find someone to work. The planned overtimes are much easier to fill than last minute overtimes. And so when we send that overtime out and nobody takes it, then we basically say, okay, you can't go home today. You're stuck here. We haven't met our minimum mannings, minimum personnel level. And so that would be an example of a force hire. You can't go home. You have to stay to work because no one's here. We have a list that we keep. We try to call people from home, and it's an hours-based list on the force hire hours. So we pick the person with the least amount of force hire hours, and we try to contact them and coax them into coming into work or else. And so that's kind of what a force hire is in a roundabout way.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. Is it safe to say that it's more complex doing this across 3 jurisdictions than it would be it was just the Sandpoint Fire Department?
Yeah, obviously, if it was just the Sandpoint Fire Department, we have a minimum staffing of 2. One person takes the day off. That's just it. The only time you would have a force hire is if someone called in sick or there's an extended injury or something like that. But when you have 3 people on, we'd always traditionally would allow one person to be off because we didn't have a minimum personnel of 3.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's for the city of Sandpoint, yes.
And just my own honesty, ignorance,
Mhm.
you're doing that, or the person doing that work is already on the clock doing it, or are they coming in to do that? Is it extra hours or is it part of your shift work?
Which work?
Just the force hiring and the scheduling and all
Oh, the
that.
staffing officer? Is that what you're referencing?
I
Like
think
who
so.
does the staffing?
Yeah. I
Okay,
think-
sure. So whoever we have it designed, whoever is the captain at Station 1 that day does staffing. So we're all trained in it. It has its nuances and like, whoops, I did it wrong.
Even though it's more complex, we're not
yeah.
bringing in more hours to
Nope.
figure it out.
No,
Thank
it's
you.
just the on-duty person at 1.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Kyle.
I'm not sure who to point this question at, but I believe Counselor Dick touched on, is this issue with sliders temporary, or is there an obvious solution to it, to getting the staffing to the point where we don't need a lot of sliders, or is it just kind of the way things are?
So what happened with originally for the west side, reason why you saw an increase in slides on the west side is when we got rid of the battalion chiefs, it left a hole in west side. So what west side was doing is they had one person on, but when that person took time off, they browned out the station and the battalion chief handled all responsibility, all responses in west. So when the battalion chiefs went away, it's like, whoa, geez, who's gonna go to the calls now? When someone takes a day off on west side. And so west side had to choose had really no choice, but they turned their minimum manning to minimum person on duty to 1. And they had to make the choice. You have to give somebody time off when you have one person working there, which means it results in overtime. And so that's when it was decided to do the slider, move someone from Station 1, charge halftime, or if no one was available from Station 1 to move to the west side, and if there was someone available at Sagal, that slider would take place from Sagal. But Sandpoint's being the middle person was kind of definitely moved more frequently than Sagal. West side never, because it was just, the impact was when someone took a time off day at west side. That's where that was created. And then obviously we've had a lot of injuries that created lots of slides versus paying overtime.
It just happened to be the other ones. It could have just as easily been Sandpoint that had those injuries.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've always waited for when they would stop, but they haven't stopped. It's just every time you think we're getting through an injury, another one occurs and then we're back to sliding. It just hasn't ended.
And then one more question, piggybacking off of your question about whether Sandpoint could do this amongst themselves. Is it easier to fill those positions rank for rank with the bigger pool of the JPA than it would be if Sandpoint just had its own force?
Well, it's always easier to fill positions when you have a bigger pool of personnel, right? When Sandpoint, I mean, it's all relative, I guess. When you have 3 people on, one person's gone, you have 6 people to choose from to fill those spots on what they're doing on their day off. So I think that the bigger the pool, the easier it is to fill a seat for sure, in my opinion.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dick.
If hopefully we're successful in these levies, yes, it's not gonna happen overnight, but that's the whole purpose of this, is to get additional personnel so that maybe we have 2 or 3 at Renco instead of 1 person. And we eliminate a lot of this sliding back and forth and overtime and things like that. But again, it's gonna take some time and support of the city and a lot of people to get these levies through.
Mr. Mayor,
Go
just a comment on morale. Everybody has stated that morale is better as a joint group. if morale is better and they feel better working together and it's more a team, perhaps the force hire would be easier. I don't know, just people might be more willing to kick in and do the extra, fill in the spot. It's just a thought I had. I don't know if that
Just
comes into play.
couple thoughts.
Go ahead, Councilman or Commissioner Wilson.
Just a general statement is, even though there's a dividing line, a border between Sagal and Sandpoint and West Side, the people, the residents of those areas contribute mightily to the economic engine of Sandpoint. I'm sure you'll agree.
Sure.
So I think that Sandpoint is well served by making sure these people have fire protection. And to do it in the most efficient and smoothest way possible. So it seems to me that all the concerns that have been brought up by the Sandpoint City Council are basically financial. Is that correct?
For me, it's just right from if may, it's less the financial concern and more the impact of the sliders to West Side and Sagal impacting our level of service in Sandpoint, our potential level of service. Because clearly we're getting compensated for those sliders. And the secondary concern, that's my primary concern. My secondary concern is the administrative burden it's placing on our staff. And knowing that we have 2 or 3 leadership level positions in the city that we need filled right now, we need to onboard those new leaders at the city. That we're hearing from our HR department that 35% of our HR department's time is spent dealing with firefighters alone. That's more than a third of our HR department's time is being sucked up by JPA right now.
By firefighters, whether it be Sandpoint, Sagal. or
Yes,
West
yeah,
Side.
the 24, 25 firefighters are a huge suck on HR resources.
But you think that these firefighters are valuable and maybe
Absolutely.
those resources are well spent.
And one thing I took away from the Fitch report is that overall, we have an outstanding level of service across all 3 of our districts. I was kind of blown away by the turnover rates, what was it, 97% of the time, if a call is received while firefighters are on another call, they'll respond to the second call on time. That's pretty impressive to me. So I applaud our firefighters for their ability to cooperate and serve our districts at such an amazing level. So it's really not a level of service concern as it is across districts. It's the impact of staffing challenges, sick leaves, paid time off, vacation time in Sagal and other districts impacting Sandpoint's day-to-day level of service.
So there's so financial / resources.
Right.
That seem to be the
Resource
concern.
allocation.
And resource allocation. So perhaps those resources could be increased with more finances.
Which is why the levies are
Yeah,
vital.
and that's what we want. There's also there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here too. I'm a resident of Dover Bay, and we pay nothing basically for fire protection. All of our property taxes go into what's called the Dover Urban Renewal Agency, and will until the end of 2028. After that, then there's probably, I would have guessed, well over $200 million of property values that can help with a lot, that can heal a lot of wounds.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. So just trying to keep it on this topic of sliders. We've got a couple other topics I'd love to discuss that people raise. So anything else about the sliders specific question? Frank?
Yeah, Mayor Grimm. So people keep talking about you feel like it's a reduction in resources because you're losing an employee here at Sandpoint and shifting them to another part of the district, right? But what we're losing track of is these are coordinated 911 response plans where if you have a large incident at Sandpoint, everyone comes, right?
Yeah.
Your responses are better, your outcomes are better, your civilian safety is better, your firefighter safety is better. So please keep your mind just on that rather than slider, because it does seem financial from my perspective. And I totally get that. You guys are stewards of City of Sandpoint's tax dollars. But it is a community effort to provide great services, and emergency services cross district lines. We travel Highway 95. We go up into the mountains. It's not just fire calls, it's MBCs, it's hazmat calls, it's water calls. We're just keep in mind collectively what we accomplish as a group, not just because when you're sliding that employee, if there's a large incident at Sandpoint, they're sliding right back. they're not just staying down in Sandpoint and Sagal. So just want to point that out. It's a key point of why these three small departments join together to provide better service.
And also, just to follow up, we're happy to support the cost of the chief, assistant chief, and the administrative assistant. Because we think that's much more efficient than obviously hiring our own, or Sandpoint having them and not getting any financial support for those positions from Sagal or from Westside.
Thank you.
Which is an expense we'd pick up without.
Jim?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So just a question first, if I might, of Sarah, how long ago did we consolidate HR, bringing all the firefighters under Sandpoint HR?
Believe it was the middle of 2021. It was right after we signed that last JPA, so I think that was right at like June 21.
So I've been on the Sagal Fire Board since 2017, I think. And all but 1 year of that, I've been on the JPA as the representative for Sagal to the JPA. I think that in my mind, the concept of sliders did exist prior to consolidation of all the employees. And so there may be firefighters who were assigned to Sandpoint prior to consolidation of HR, and we kind of discussed that as an old habit. But what Commissioner Lewis had referenced, that we have all of those firefighters and they all belong to the JPA. We're all members of the JPA. We have a legal agreement between us. And so we're one entity. I mean, we exist as separate entities with our assets, but we're one entity with one set of employees. And so if there is a person who is injured at Sagal and that causes a situation where you're now filling those because you have someone out of work, but why, or Westside or Sandpoint, why is that person, quote, a Sagal or a Sandpoint or that person is part of that pool? And so this could just as well say, well, that person, we could slide the injured person, or not slide, we could define that injured person as normally at another station, and then that sliding would be happening in an opposite direction. And so it's my understanding of this agreement between the three entities that we have that one pool. That was different a couple of years ago, prior to 2021, but as we are now.
So before we used to bill back and forth. So it was literally like Sandpoint would bill Sagal would bill this. So that was the billing that yes.
Exactly,
It's still happening on the back end of it. It's just all now done in Sandpoint. It's just on the payroll side of things, behind the scenes.
And the consolidation of employees was at the request of the city of Sandpoint to simplify things. And so if that's not working, then maybe we should revisit that. But right now, I'm not sure that there is any sliding.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, for the purposes of, dissolve all the lines and it's one and they're all.
I think that's what our agreement says.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
we've always
But
thought of it.
instead of looking at it line by line, who's going where, just think of it collectively.
I think there are firefighters who routinely work in one location, but they're part of the Selkirk Fire Agency.
Yeah. And if you need more resources for administrative, then we can tell us, and then we might be able to contribute more, so you have more resources.
Well, I just had kind of a question or a comment because I've read many of the emails that have been sent to me, and one of the comments that has stuck out is that the firefighters are frustrated with being down men at stations. And so I don't know how that fits into this, but I just wanted that to be vocalized here because I've heard that as a frustration and I've read it in emails.
I think that's a big part of it.
And that's,
So I can reply to that. I think that, and part of this is that we have changed the level of service. We're trying to change that level of service, and Carywood has been open 4 years.
Since 2019.
And so if Carywood were not open, it would be a different scenario. Then the number of people available to Sagal would probably be more appropriate. And Carywood was open because we had an opportunity with a SAFER grant. Am I correct? As long as I'm still getting nods, and I'll keep going. And so we had that opportunity. We've moved beyond that. We need to get a person there to make that, because I do agree and believe that manning a station with one person or sending one person to a fire is not appropriate. So we need to step up and make sure that that manning is appropriate. But that's a little bit of the history of it. That's, I mean, it's always good. I think you have to know how you got to where you are to make sure the next move is the right one.
Well, and I think part of our discussion and looking at these levies and stuff is, correct me if I'm wrong, the state holds us to a 3% increase on our budget on an annual basis. The county changes as it grows, it changes its mill amounts to reduce existing property owners. So even though the area is growing, the tax rate is not growing with it to meet the infrastructure needs, personnel to support that.
Hence the levies.
Hence the levy. So they're reducing property owners' taxes, and we're gonna go back and try to raise their taxes to support the growth, to provide enough services for them. It just doesn't.
You're preaching to the choir. I got $80 million worth of sewer, $20 million worth of water, and
Frustrating,
$20 million worth of streets.
very frustrating.
One of the things I'd like to point out is that if one of the concerns that was mentioned was moving personnel so that our staffing levels were lower, one of the things that could be done to alleviate that is to raise our minimum levels. You know, right now our current minimum is 2 in the city of Sandpoint. We could raise that to 3. I mean, because since I've been here in the last 20 years, the city of Sandpoint hasn't hired any additional personnel. So that could be one method of helping that process, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not to beat it to death, but I answered West Side's slider. I forgot the other portion of the increase from 2023 is, we've just lost so many people. We just hired the person who left in June. They can't even get on an apparatus until the end of March. A lot of the sliding is due to the fact that we've lost so many people. We just hired 3 people and one of those had quit in June. So the increase you're seeing, a lot of sliding was just our lack of overall staffing, our vacancies that we're trying to get. We had a list that expired. We had to retest. It was just a really long process. And so there was just a lot of sliding from that as well.
Yeah, and just for the purposes of open understanding, that's what we're feeling too. As the city, I've got 14 vacancies right now and people doing 2 jobs.
Yeah.
And so that's understanding, that's my stress and our staff stress. So
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So I think we have a better framework on the sliders. Anyone else want to mention anything on that subject? And again, I think this educational, not so much debate, but more educational is what's going to help us all try to understand what the best path forward here is. There's another question. I think it was Councilman Schreiber asked about auto aid. Can somebody who's skilled and qualified speak to how auto aid, if implemented, would again, put yourself in my shoes. The JPA, if it were to go away, if we had auto aid, doesn't that give us the same quality level response times, or?
Well, your costs would go up because you'd be paying the full boat for your chief, your assistant chief, and administrative person.
Sure, I understand that, absolutely. But in terms of the response times.
Yeah.
Reimbursing the.
Yeah, you'd be moving backwards financially.
Okay. I guess just in terms of the response time, if this place catches on well, not this place, there's a lot of firefighters here.
Today.
A random house in Sandpoint catches on fire. Is the response time going to be different with auto aid than it is with the current JPA?
I'll go ahead and answer that, if that's all right.
Yeah,
So yeah, auto aid has been discussed and for a long time in Bonner County. We haven't seen it yet, and it could be a solution. The only problem with auto aid is I'll use Sandpoint as example. Let's say we have an auto aid agreement with Northside that the chief just talked about, which is could be a really good thing. We send them an engine. We have 2 people on duty. Now the city of Sandpoint's not covered at all because they've dropped out of the JPA. Because we're fighting a fire in Northside. So that's the disadvantage about having auto aids, because you kind of create your own isolated pockets of where you mostly provide service, but then you get an auto aid agreement and you're bumped out. With our current system, we've got move ups. So if we have, let's say, a large structure fire in Sagal, you know, we might have 3 engines out there. Someone's going to move from west side to cover the city. Granted, that's only 1 firefighter. Like, our system's not properly staffed or funded. And any general, and that's why we're talking to levies with these commissioners to build a more robust fire service throughout Bonner County. That's my concerns with auto aid. So as soon as you dump the city, because you're helping Northside or one of your other auto aid partners, we currently do not have any volunteers. So then you have no fire protection. How does that work?
Yeah.
Not really well.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Mr. Mayor,
These,
go ahead, if you don't mind.
It just, unless the chief wants to jump in the middle of it, so I've looked at this for the last couple of weeks, and some of the incidents that we had, so I'll use the Church Road fire on Monday. The fact is that right now, if we were all in the room, we sign automatic gate agreements, and 5 minutes later, we got a fire, would we feel a difference? No. The problem is what happens in the future. What happens when new leadership comes into the organizations and they reassess their organizational abilities and they assess their resources. So for example, something happens in Sandpoint, and when you hear me under public comment later, you'll hear that Sandpoint worries me. It's the greatest community risk. Something happens in Sandpoint right now, you're getting the entire Selkirk Fire Department and we're getting coverage from Kootenai County. The Sagal Fire District may or may not initially dump their entire fire district to help Sandpoint, because now they've got to go down to Kootenai County and ask for coverage. And the first question Timberlake's going to have is, well, where's your fire? Well, no, we just dumped our whole fire department up north, but can you come cover us? Well, yeah, that's kind of not how the system works, because then I create a leapfrog issue, right?
Yeah.
Now Northern Lakes has to come up, then Kootenai County has to come up. So right now it works because we're 1 fire department, and a fire at Sandpoint is our fire. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Councilman Dick?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, is there a difference between auto aid and mutual aid? What are we on currently with Northside, between Selkirk Fire and Northside? Are we on mutual aid and we
Currently, we're
are
on
currently
mutual aid.
discussing auto aid? Can you tell me the difference between the two?
Mutual aid is when you get a call, you basically have to pick up the microphone and ask for the other units to come. An auto aid is built into the response plan that runs out of the dispatch center, so everybody's built into that.
Gotcha.
So it kind of helps delay some of the turnout time, wheels rolling time, because it's just built into that system.
Okay, and is Selkirk as a whole, with all of us, are we currently staffed to our capacity right now? Because I also echo Councilor Rule's sentiments on some of the emails we've got about the staffing, and it sounds like some of that was just because of we had lost some firefighters, but we also have an 18-page article from the Reader here that we're burned out with staffing being the number one. I mean, I think the actual quote is the heart of the matter is inadequate staffing, right? Now, is this because of the retention issue that we had? Is this because of the sliders and the minimum staffing that we have at each location? I guess if somebody could help me answer that here, because I think that's a big thing to discuss on the sliders, if that's the issue.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jim.
Just to repeat the comment, I don't think that any one of these taxing districts is at an inadequate manning level, but the Selkirk Fire Agency may be at an inadequate manning level.
I just had a question, if I may, to follow up. So automatic aid, mutual aid. It's faster if you have automatic aid, right? Because it's automatic. You got to pick up the phone with manual. But once you call all your guys to the fire, you still have a leapfrogging issue. It doesn't go away, right? So if everybody comes here, because we have a fire, and Sagal has nobody, and West Side has nobody, and they have to call in from wherever they call in from, I'm sorry. So I don't really see the relevance in that.
Our system right now, the JPA, the entire JPA system with the three agencies involved, at its very core is an automatic aid system. It's not, I mean, we have grown it into where we have shared costs and shared oversight of administration, things like that. But at the core of the response, it's an automatic aid system. Everything is built in to the run cards in the dispatch center. If there is a fire at 123 anywhere street, they know that this station, that station, have to go to that fire. That has been, and I digress, because I didn't know the Selkirk JPA had been around since 2014. I thought it was like a 20, maybe 15 or 16. I didn't realize it went back that far, but it has, I mean, that is what it is at its core. It's an automatic aid system that has additional aspects to it.
So just a factual question. So if it is automatic in its nature and Sagal tends to have more calls in its greater rural area, that means that Sandpoint's automatically getting pulled out of the city, resulting in the hole that Captain Frank discussed and being pulled down to Sagal. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Thank you.
Can I add one caveat to that, Keith?
Mhm.
It's accurate, except that Sandpoint will get pulled down to Sagal because they're the closest station. So Sagal, Sandpoint, Carywood, then Renco, the Dover side, west side will bump in. So I mean, that's what we mean by move ups, is that there is a piggyback where we do dump resources based on nature of call, just because we're focused on that at that time. But obviously we all have radio, so if we realize once that call begins to get stabilized, we have the ability to, relieve resources to get back to the primary district, so.
Can I add one more thing that,
Yeah.
I think is not being addressed? That's a big part of this whole process is that, with automatic aid, that's typically associated with like fires, okay, or mutual aid is typically with fires. Right now with our current system, if we get back-to-back calls, it's an auto bump up with Selkirk as a whole. So if one crew's already on a call, they'll call the next crew instead of, hold on, let me call the next crew to come up. They're automatically, it's an automatic system. And it's for any type of call, not just big fire calls. So.
Thank you for clarification.
I wanted to ask one thing before we lose track. I may have misheard you. Deb, did you say that Sagal has more calls than Sandpoint? It's a larger rural area, but always the majority of the calls are in Sandpoint. We get the chief
Okay, then that was
call. So
Right.
just December 55 in Sagal, 72 in Sandpoint.
Okay,
So it's
then I
condensed.
misunderstood that.
But yeah.
Thank you
I
for
think the
pointing that
Fitch
out. I appreciate
study's
that.
old.
Yeah.
I think the Fitch study's old. There was some data in the Fitch study that showed it the other way. And that's why we got to look at today's data.
Yeah.
And I think what Geraldine represented is true today.
Okay.
Yeah,
That
this
Sandpoint has more calls.
December's.
Thank you for the
Yeah,
factual.
and
And are those fire calls or all calls?
I think it's all.
It's
all calls.
Yeah.
It's chief's report every month.
It's
Right.
broken down by different types of calls.
I've not seen one of those yet, sorry.
I've got it right here.
Yeah,
Sagal has
it's,
more
there's
fire calls.
a lot of data.
I have.
Okay, so then that's.
That's where you got that
there's
number.
More fire calls, but not more overall calls.
Particularly, I think there's more
Then
Sagal.
that's
That's
where my mistake. Thank you.
The December report has 5 Sandpoint fire calls and 1 Sagal fire call.
Okay, so. in
So
December,
it's-
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's rural, more highway, you're right, the demographics are
Different.
vitally different. But you're just boiling down to numbers.
I wanted to bring up there was a question about training, at least to talk about that. Can someone who's qualified speak to, could the training still occur? Would it still occur? Now that you're all on the symmetrical air packs? Can you fill in on that? Not to ask you to play devil's advocate, but would you still train together?
That's up to the chiefs.
Okay.
At the end of the day, Northside's not in the JPA and we rarely train with them.
Okay.
It's up to politics and chiefs really of how all that shakes out. I mean, I can't answer, yes, of course.
Yeah, no. that's-
But really, I mean, it's reality is, I mean,
Yeah, I'm ignorant to a large
Yeah,
degree, so I'm asking.
it,
some
it,
dumb
it
questions.
seems, it appears like normally when all that happens, that like, individuals take care of themselves, train themselves and focus on that. They don't, they might get together every once in a while and do some type of regional training or something like that. But my experience here as being separate versus as the group, we definitely isolated ourselves for sure.
Mhm.
And that was, we had interesting fire chiefs back then and everyone had interesting fire chiefs as well. And, politics were, but that's not to say that can't happen again. There were times where we didn't even speak to Sago firefighters just because of their chiefs and our chiefs at war with each other. It was just reality. And this JPA brought us together. We didn't know that was going to happen, but it did.
Yeah,
It was,
it's something to celebrate.
It's been a good thing. So
Sure.
would it continue? I hope.
That is the concept, especially when you get into like what we were talking about, what we're trying to do with Northside, getting into the auto aid agreement side with them and in the mutual aid, yes, it is a manual deal. And yes, we don't really train with Northside as probably as much as we should. But it is in the framework of the auto aid agreement that you have to train together because you're now a response partner. So you have to be familiar with the same fireground operating procedures. You have to be familiar with each other's equipment, things like that. So the training aspect of that in that agreement that we're doing with Northside is built into that framework.
Anyone else have questions on training?
Do you want to talk?
I'm
Gentlemen,
gonna have the public speak. at the
okay,
end.
he's had his hand up for a long time. Just-
So moving on, there was some questions about was 23 an anomaly when it comes to those sliders, 21, 22. I know we don't probably have great data, but anyone have a idea?
I would think as long as we're having the turnover problem, the slider issue will continue. If we can, through levies, have better staffing, less turnover, I think the slider issue will improve.
Mr.
Go ahead.
Sarah, would you have better info on that, just because you do kind of?
Well, I know when we went through this, and this is pulling back a couple years, but I know when we went through the new, hiring new chief and all that stuff, I think that stuff kind of leveled off and we didn't do it as much. And then, again, we could pull data and stuff like that, but,
Okay.
I do know it wasn't utilized as much as what it is now.
Okay.
It was more pullback on overtime from what I remember, and that was what was brought up, because the overtime went way up. So then it was like, well, how can we fix this? And it was talked about at the JPA. Well, okay, let's slide things, and that was decided, I think it was in the summer.
Somewhere in 22.
22. So it was, so that was the solution to that.
Mr. Mayor, along those same lines, we have an idea of what overtime budget looked like for 2023.
For all of them?
Yep.
I looked at that the other day. Sandpoint, I believe, was at 40,000 overtime. Sagal was at 90,000. And, West Side, I believe, was 30,000. And that's pulling from what I looked at, like, it was a while ago, so. But that was in 23. So in 22 is about half that for all of them. So on top of the sliders, you had all that overtime as well.
Okay. And then we also had some retention issues that would have added to the overtime costs as well. Okay, I'm still a little hung up on staffing here though, right? Because we have two levies that we don't necessarily know if we're going to get, right? But we've got anxious parties to get after those levies, both for West Side and for Sagal, specifically to go after additional staff people, right?
Yes.
Yes.
At least what I've read and from some of the emails right now, we may be at capacity and we've hired and replaced those people, right, at this current juncture. But we still don't have enough people. Is that a good representation? Okay. Is there low hanging fruit with Northside to come into the JPA? We don't know what the levies are going to look like, right? We don't know for sure if we're going to get them. We're certainly supportive of them as a city, or at least I am as a council person, right? But we got to look at what we could do right now to increase the pool of employees. And Northside looks like an option. I still don't understand why we don't have Northside in the JPA. Maybe can we speak to that or someone speak to that?
Politics.
I'd like to hold the public comment for the end. I think we're almost there, but,
Mr. Mayor.
go ahead.
In response to that sentiment, Councilman Dick, I'm not exactly sure how many firefighters are employed in Northside, but let's assume it's 5 and we bring Northside in and that increases our pool of firefighters who we then balance the sliding issue and everything that goes with that. But it still doesn't bring it back to, it still doesn't resolve what I articulated as my secondary concern, which was the impact on our city resources and our city staff allocation of resources towards the management of the JPA. So one, and this is something I've not heard any discussion of, but we currently don't have a JPA executive director in the absence of a city administrator. I'm wondering if there's any, you talk about your levies going towards funding more firefighters. Would there be any appetite or consideration by the JPA board to allocate some levy funds for the city to employ somebody to administer, not a JPA employee, but a city employee to actually administer and act as executive director, support HR, support finance at the city of Sandpoint?
Yeah, an answer to that would be, basically, when the budget is presented to us as commissioners in West Side, this is the chunk of money that Sandpoint wants from us. And that could vary depending upon what your costs are. And then we decide based upon your proposal if we're going to accept it or not. So if your costs have gone up, then present that to us so that we can make a determination.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'm just asking, it's not your cost, it's the cost of administration of the JPA by the JPA.
Exactly.
So we're still stuck that we're 3 different entities. Happen to be 3 taxing districts paying into, but one entity. And so I think we need to, just want to drive that point home that either we are one entity or we aren't. And we pay percentages based on that cost allocation, which is call volume and assessed value. And so that then it's just during budget cycle, we determine what that number is and we split it based on that percentage. And we were, and that percentage currently in the last budget cycle, the numbers are, West Side is at 13.58, Sandpoint's at 37.7, and Sagal's at 48.7. So the Fitch study those were hypotheticals from how many years ago?
2020, I think, was when it was completed.
The actual numbers are different than that. So right now, Sagal's picking up 11% more.
We do bill actual, so I mean, we're getting reimbursed for those, so.
Yeah.
If we spend more time, that is getting so I think that part of it is.
And there's economies of scale to be realized here. Because even if you weren't administering for Sagal or for West Side, you have fixed costs, that we're helping you defray those fixed costs.
Well,
In some regards, no, we did hire people to manage stuff, so I mean, to me, yes, but no, I mean.
The variable
it
costs,
depends.
yeah.
Yes.
But there are fixed costs as well, and we are covering fixed costs.
And
Mr. Mayor, if I might
And
just
Council-
add to that. So, I understand, thank you for pointing out budget and percentage pieces. And I think something that's being missed here is that we do get reimbursed for the cost. And I know this has already been stated, but I think it's on Sandpoint's list of things to do is to calculate out the lost time of the employee that we don't get reimbursed for that cannot serve our other employees at the city. And so there needs to be some sort of reasonable calculation done about, if we take, what Sandpoint has 100 employees roundabout, and we divide that down and we decide, okay, every individual employee should get this percentage of ISIS. And we figure out what the loss is that should be reimbursed because she's not able to give that time to our employees because she's spending so much time within the JPA. And the same goes for Sarah's effort and time and work. Is the rest of Sandpoint losing that they're not being reimbursed for because this person has to spend this much time to make the JPA function and work?
And maybe
And I
the
think
answer
that's,
is,
and that's our fault. That's totally on us that we have not been better about that.
or the answer
calculation.
is another half-time HR person to cover JPA and triple the cost to JPA.
Right, but like I said, if that's on our backs, we need to calculate that out and we're responsible to send that out and say, okay, this is a cost we're bearing also in addition to that.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
for the record, Councilman Sparrow has left the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, because I think I heard a comment from Sarah that I want to make sure I understand. I believe I know the answer, but when you said the comment, you bill actuals, that's billing actuals of the time for the people in HR to administer this.
So there are two ways of doing it. One, my time is an actual flat amount that we estimate for the year. And same with HR, my employees' time, so payroll, any of the other finance ones is by the hour. So yes, that does ebb and flow with the part-time of the year. For example, in December and January, we have the station changes. That's a lot of finance behind the scenes going on. So that is tracked by the hour. So it's
trickling
kind of
down to-
mixed, yes. So to answer that, yes, I mean, the ones that we did on a per hourly, we did that because we knew that. The rest of the ones that are kind of more flat or I know I'm gonna spend X amount on the different things. Now this, we won't be billing for this, you know, so that won't get billed on the behind the scenes, but it's time that's spent
On a JPA.
on it, so.
Mr. Woodward, I have a ignorant question to ask. So Carywood is an example, funded through a safety grant, safer grant. So you expand the level of service in the district by having that. And grant goes away, so now there's working down or lack of coverage. What prevents any individual district from, I guess maybe the answer is the JPA board, but from throwing a station down in Talachi or something and expanding their level of service further, causing more stress on the system?
Well, if say we wanted to open up the Bottle Bay station and we wanted to put 2 people in there, then we would have to pay out of the JPA, out of Selkirk Fire Pool for those extra employees. I think that's the answer, right? That the level of service provided in each of the districts, I mean, Sandpoint could open up another fire station, but it would require employees. And since we have this pool of employees, we're paying for that pool of employees based on actuals.
But
It would change the percentage that,
yeah, financially, but in terms of the
State-
demand or the working down, the demand or the working down or the, shortage, of employees to fill those positions, I mean.
Yes, we'd have to make the pool bigger,
Yeah,
certainly.
okay.
Yeah,
Great.
Mr. Mayor,
Go
let
ahead.
me clarify on safer grants, how they work though. Basically, chiefs usually only go for safer grants unless they anticipate that the revenue base from the area that they serve will be large enough. Usually after 3 years, the safer grant goes away. So it's funded heavily by the federal government to start, like 75%, then 50%, and then it just goes away. So if a chief hasn't done their homework, anticipate that the revenue will be there to support those positions once the funding goes away.
Yeah.
You should never go for a safer grant.
It's sort of a preemptive way to plan for the growth that's happening, so.
Yeah.
Basically, you could get a safer grant for 3 people. After 3 years, your budget is supposed to be able to sustain them. By the grant, the parameters of the grant, you have to hire them full time. So if you can't afford them, you have to hire them, then immediately lay them off. And that doesn't do your staffing any good. So you
That's
have to
something
have
we
a
could
plan
look
there.
at if there's an expectation that a levy is about to go through.
Absolutely.
And we
Yeah,
could
that's our
kind of-
plan. Yeah.
That
If
is- that
if
is
the
our
levy
plan.
passes, we're gonna fill those positions immediately.
Yeah.
And then, and
because
the use
you
of
don't have to wait
safer
the
grant
year
to pay those wages until the cash flow starts coming in from the levy.
I got you. Yep. Okay, I'm slow, but I catch up sometimes.
So I did want to mention one other thing is that during the fit study, it was suggested that, the model we use the calls and we also use the property tax. And so I also do another analysis behind the scenes that looks at how many staff it has per agency. Also, I look at how many stations there are. I also do budgets. So I look at not just those 2 things, but I look at that. And those all have been somewhat in line with the percentages, not far off. So those 2 things are right now still in line line with what that percentage is. If we start adding staff to other places, that would throw those off. And I would then suggest to the board that we look at that and redesign that, just as a, throw it out there that that is something that would be discussed and.
So like, for example, this spring, Sagal had an emergency, the Newford Road closed, so a big portion of our access area was inaccessible. So through JPA and Sagal, we were able to open the Cindy Acatine Fire Station and staff it, during that period in order to give service to that part of our district.
Thank you. I want to let the public speak. Those were all the questions that I had highlighted. I want the public to be able to hear any other ideas and questions floating out there. So those from the public, I'm about to open that up. Any other thoughts or comments?
I just had one comment on the HR. It's probably not a popular comment, but if there is that burden, traditionally Sagal operated without HR, it's the chief. Westside operated without HR, it's the chief. Sandpoint operated forever without HR, it was the chief. We can put more burden on our two chiefs to take on more HR responsibilities to lighten the load for HR to reduce that percent.
Yeah.
Right, Kevin?
Absolutely not. It might not be a popular, but that is reality.
I think it's behooves us all to have a professional HR. I do recall some news articles in the past, so.
Yes.
Geraldine?
I have a question that didn't come up from the council members there that I wanted to just ask you. Your finance slide, it showed numbers that don't reflect what I see in the 2024 budget that was generated from the JPA council. Generated initially with Sandpoint and then passed on down and that we approved. And especially that slide showed a deficit of 4,100 on Sandpoint side. And it didn't show the income and expense that we have seen outlined here, and it didn't show the proportion. So I didn't know where the finances in that statement came from.
Out of the pitch study.
Yeah.
And so it's quite, it's like a misrepresentation to say, hey, this JPA model is costing us money, because that's not the numbers we're working off for this budget this year. And so I just felt like I didn't understand that. I don't feel that we should be making a decision based on those finances when they don't really represent what we're seeing right now today.
Thank you. And I didn't, by no means I intend to mislead anyone. I read this and took my presentation out of this. I totally agree.
Yeah.
If the numbers aren't accurate, we should, any financial related questions should be.
Absolutely. And I think I just got this at the latest meeting, so I'm happy to pass it on. So.
Would you have those from the meeting?
Back in the last budgeting season, yeah, that's all stuff that we do last year, so yeah.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah.
2024.
So can
I
you
can
make
pull
sure
it
that
up, but-
can you make sure that council gets that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'd love to open it up to the public now. Thank you for being patient and for coming out and listening, and I'm sure you got questions. So 3 minutes apiece would be great to hear your questions or thoughts. I can't guarantee we're going to respond to each one because that's typically challenging, as we can see in some other entities. So I think the best way to do it is just comments. So Melissa, is there anyone who signed up for comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. And if anyone would like to speak, if you would please grab the wireless mic that's up here on the podium and just speak into it for the recording. First who signed up was Jeff Armstrong.
Just hold it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I know I jumped in earlier and answered some questions, but I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts. I know some of you, but there's a lot of
Sir,
you.
can I just interrupt you for a second?
Sorry.
Can I interrupt you just for a second? Just in light of the recent events, I should just state this for the audience. State your name for the record and let us know if you reside within city limits, which fire district you reside and represent. I would ask that all comments remain civil and non-disparaging to any individual, employee, organization, or business. Thank you.
Uh-oh, better rethink them, huh? Jeff Armstrong, I reside in the North Side Fire District, just outside the city limits. For those of you that I don't know, I'm the deputy fire chief, specifically in charge of operations. I came here in July of last year with 25 years of experience in the fire service. the majority of which have been in California. The last 11 years, I've been in executive leadership where I had the opportunity as a fire chief to be in many discussions at the center of regionalization projects, contracts, and fire department reconstitutions. Specifically, I've assisted 2 fire departments with their reconstituting their organizations, and should Sandpoint choose to leave Selkirk Fire, there's a lot of work ahead. It's not impossible, but there's a lot of work. Reconstituting is never as easy as you think. It usually reflects a step backwards from regionalization and is always more expensive. So I'm the new guy in the room, but I come here without any biases and without the emotion that a lot of folks in the room have. I came here because I believed in what we were doing, what the fire service in Bonner County was doing, and in Chief Gilcrease's leadership. However, this decision should not be about jobs or personalities. It should be about the public safety of those in the county. Monday's fire on Church Street was a great example of how we are not only working together on one operational page, but how the incident commander, was able to move folks around on different apparatus stations, combining crews and shifts in an effort to make sure the needs of the fire were met, with the help of Chief Gilcrease, of course. But also, most importantly, station coverage was in place in Sandpoint. There are 2 sides to this issue, the districts and the city. If Sandpoint withdraws operationally, things may change. The districts will probably be fine. Anecdotally, I could argue that Selkirk Fire might be better off in some ways. If I were a resident of the Sagal district, I may be in favor of this because I could see more of my dollars leveraged locally. But the city should be very concerned. Everywhere I look in Sandpoint, there's enormous risk, and discussions continue on more multi-story buildings, apartments, etc. In seeking to address the increased risk, there's a lot of discussion about auto aid and mutual aid. While I expect those individual departments to still support each other, should a split happen, make no mistake, it can be very different in the future. Additionally, these agreements can be withdrawn from or be altered. Ultimately, the future leadership of these districts would have to evaluate their resources and may choose to protect their own communities first rather than send help. These agreements are very complex, as is the problem of fire protection in Bonner County. For the sake of time, I can't get too far in the weeds, but I remain available for thoughts or questions. The discussion of the city should be data influenced, not data driven, because there's a lot outside the data that can be evaluated. With 6 months here in the system, I can tell you that the city benefits financially and operationally from the JPA. Data is just numbers until we make it tell a story. The neat thing about data is sometimes you can manipulate it to tell any story you want. So let's make sure we look at all aspects of this. I understand public safety is costly, and I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Melissa?
Mr. Mayor, Merlin Glass.
Well, I'll agree with what a lot he said. Oh, for the record, my name is Merlin Glass, resident of Dover in West Side Fire District. I agree with what he said. I came from a department that went from not being part of a JPA and transitioned into a JPA and joined 10 other fire departments within that JPA. There's always a rough patch. And we've talked a lot about, the ins and outs of this document and what it means to the individual districts. But what it really boils down to is staffing. Solve staffing, you solve most of what we've talked about here. If you look over at the board there at the number of firefighters that are on duty, you can just look at downtown Sandpoint and get an idea of how much work they have to do if there's something significant that happens there. 7 people on duty a day is not even 2 full engine crews, okay? And the nearest resources that are coming in are at a distance, so operationally that's going to be a challenge. You in this room, though, are the executors of this document, okay? But there's some things that are lacking. There's no SOGs in there. Our department transitioned and joined in a joint communication center as a benchmark to cooperate. We had the same problems, automatic aid, mutual aid, all of that. And our staffing was constantly with 4 people on every engine. We had that luxury, but it comes as a cost. And you can't quantify it by trying to figure out the number of calls and divide it by the number of people and the number of dollars. Because if it's your family, my family, your home, everything down here has low, medium, and high hazard occupancies. and they all require a certain number of people to do the work. And presently, we don't have it. There's a failure to establish what a minimum engine crew staffing is. And that's because, and that pollutes the conversation. Because if you can't establish what should be on one engine crew, you can't do 5. You can't do 10. And in the case of West Side, we have one person on one engine. So think about being that one person, having to navigate in the winter, going to a structure fire or an accident on the highway and figure out how they're feeling and whether or not counting the dollars and cents means anything to them. Okay. They need help. And that's the purpose of the levies and advertising to the public. The current situation in an honest fashion will pay dividends in getting the levies approved. I got that much faith in the public here to understand what their needs are. And, you know, that's my 2 cents. I'm an unpolished advocate for firefighter safety, but it has dividends to everybody in this room. And so 13 seconds over.
Appreciate your comments.
Bernie Frischette?
Bernie Frechette, Captain Selkirk Fire, started at 2002 as a Sandpoint volunteer, worked for Sagal, and now I'm Selkirk. So I'm going to kind of talk to you as 3 different people all at once. Talk to your concern about force hires. Many of us are stepping up to the plate and doing force hires. During the years, the family has changed. Mothers, fathers, working more children. So it's harder for the crew as a whole to help out because we're trying. Hear your concern, but we got a lot of kids, me not being one of them. Efficiency you brought up is the military. Absolutely, positively. We are more efficient because we're Selkirk Fire. You touched on his point because you said that we covered 97% of our calls because of the efficiency that he talked about, because we're Selkirk Fire. You talked about finances. You're getting that money back to you as a Sagal guy because of his 97% that he talked about, because of his efficiency he talked about in a military base. You talked about morale. Before Selkirk, as an old school Sagal guy, guess what? Morale sucked too. Morale's awesome. Morale's down. It's up and down. It depends upon what's going on in this room. We talked about quarterly trainings. Guess what we did in the past? Quarterly trainings with Sandpoint. You know, never happened enough quarterly trainings. You know why? Sandpoint had a goal. Sagal had a goal. Westside had a goal. We weren't together. I absolutely positively agree with you. We need to do it more. But guess what? It happens more when we're one. Think of it like of a football team. There's 6 guys over here and 6 guys over here and 6 guys over here, but they're not together. They really don't know each other. And that's a super important point that we haven't talked about. Because to put on my Sagal cap before my Sandpoint brothers that I work with, I didn't know them as well as they know me. And guess what? They keep me alive and I keep them alive. And that comes back to money. You're keeping me out of the hospital by them knowing me, by us being one. Trust me on that one. I know these guys 1,000 times more because we're one. We talked about if we separate, guess what? We're living in different areas now. Your taxpayers benefit by Sagal and Westside coming in faster. If we separate, and now you say, where's my Sandpoint people? They're living elsewhere because they have to, not because they don't love this community. They have to. We talked about benefits in 4 days with our super cold temperatures. Jason Cordell and his crew went into Sandpoint 17 times. I went into Sandpoint 14 times in 4 consecutive days for a total of 31 calls to cover the city with all the broken pipes. And there have been times that when we have a Sandpoint call, I, as a Sagal engine, have sat in that parking lot saying, I'm covering the city. We are 10,000 times better as one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
He's passionate, man. All right, Bernie.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Christian Schwab,
I think he left.
He
He
looks
left.
like he is
That
departed.
was Jim.
Amelia Boyd,
Amelia Boyd, Sandpoint resident. Yeah, that is a hard act to follow. I do have questions, though. Just listening to the chief, I know you want comments, but I do have questions and concerns because I am a Sandpoint resident. So if it is in essence, chief, as you said, that it's an automatic aid system in essence anyway, what is the difference if we stay out of or stay in JPA? Why hasn't there been any movement toward a joint powers authority? Everybody's kind of skipped that in the discussion. So for me, as a resident and taxpayer, why hasn't that been moved forward? Engineer Toussaint? Sorry, did I get that right? You mentioned about the public outreach programs and all that you guys do, which is fantastic. Will they disappear if we're out of JPA? I mean, you won't go into the schools anymore if we're not in there? Will the funding not be available because of that? So that's a question. I had moved from New Hampshire. We are a rural state, usually about 10 miles by 10 miles. The little town I moved from, we had 2 firefighters and a huge volunteer staff, huge. So is that not something we cannot do in this area? I know my surrounding towns in New Hampshire did not have city firefighters. They had volunteer staff that were trained in firefighting that were able to fulfill those. And if you had a town that had a major emergency, I guarantee you, all those firefighters went and they were volunteer staff, the majority of them. I would, say about 80%. Is that not something that we are able to do in this area? And I find it remiss to say, or to hear that if Sandpoint had a major emergency, that all the other districts would ignore us. I don't find that a possibility. It's not human nature. I've seen it all over the world and all over where I've lived. Major emergency in one city, everybody and their mother who's able to help comes and helps. So I understand and I really thank you and appreciate you for the work you did. And actually, I did help in your training. You all were at a house that I had that was a tear down and tore the crap out of it. Sorry. Out of it last year. So I'm all about your safety, my neighbor's safety. These questions that I think are important for taxpayers and not utilizing a volunteer firefighting system that I know, because I've lived it, works.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd.
You want to address her question about volunteer firefighters?
Not yet.
I'd love to just finish up the public comment, if we can do that first.
Mr. Mayor, that is all who have indicated an interest to speak during the public comment portion.
Excellent. I'd love to just do a final sort of wrap up, volunteer question. Anyone want to jump on that one? I know it's challenging. You didn't sign up to speak?
I didn't sign up. Can I say something?
Sure. Don't be derogatory. No personal remarks.
Grab the microphone.
No derogatory state, you heard.
No, my name is Jeff Calhoun. I've been in Sandpoint, working for Sandpoint as a Sagal employee. I'm not gonna split it, for 6.5 years. So I've been at this station. So volunteers, we don't have a volunteer system anymore. Neither department does. And that was your mutual aid. That was your auto aid, mutual aid, because you're not gonna dump your first in crew out of your station. Your volunteers would come in, pick up an apparatus and take it into Sandpoint, vice versa. Right? We are all severely understaffed. All of them, every department. It's not just Sandpoint, Sago, West Side, oh, it's just this side of the table. No, it's everybody. Sandpoint hasn't hired the two people that have been gone since March, and you haven't hired anybody in 20 years or added new people. Sago has added new people, I think 6 people since this all started after me. So they're growing, they're progressing, they're moving forward, they're still moving forward. So it's there, it's starting to work, but going backwards, we would have to go to waiting for volunteers to come in, which we don't have. We should, but we don't. That got killed. So the Joint Power Authority was started and going forward with Chief Ron Stocking. Ron Stocking left because he couldn't push it forward because of the stopgap that was in front of him. And that was the person that was at the top. So it's been there. We've tried to push it. He's tried to push it. It got shot down.
Any other responses to where did all the volunteers go? Clint?
I mean, sure, I'll respond to it. Yeah, no, we used to have a pretty robust volunteer corps through all departments. I think honestly, COVID was one of the things that was really killed it, but we just didn't have chiefs. Our last chief before Gilcrease, and Gilcrease just inherited basically not much of a volunteer corps. There just wasn't any effort put towards that program. He took it over. We used to have like Thursday night trainings once a month where duty crew participated, and then off-duty crew would get paid OT. As soon as off-duty crews stopped getting paid OT, they stopped coming. So it slowly just died for some reason. And I'm gonna put it on it's harder to find good volunteers because there's a certain level of certifications you need as a firefighter. You can't just have someone come hand out stuff at the food bank. It's a little bit more involved. So that's one thing that, the requirements are higher. And we just haven't had leadership in that position really pushing for a volunteer corps.
And Clint, can I just add to that there's been kind of a unique amount of people hiring all over around us. I think all of Northside's firefighters are volunteers. A big part of us are volunteers. There's a lot of opportunity right now that all the volunteers' goals to get career job, and there's a lot of jobs to be had. So that's where we lost a lot of our good volunteers. They all got hired and moved on.
Yeah. And also just to piggyback on that, I mean, we are not the Lone Rangers in the volunteer shortage. Volunteerism is in firefighting anyway, is down nationwide. I mean, it's not unique to us. I had the opportunity to sit in with an Idaho Fire Chiefs volunteer division. They were having their meeting several months ago. And I thought I was pretty good at thinking outside the box, but these folks and these chief officers are coming up with everything they can think of to get volunteers to come in and stay, and they're feeling the pinch. I mean, shy of having to pay people to come in. It's that bad. We would love to have volunteers come back. We get calls every once in a while. Tammy tells me people calling in to want to volunteer, but our program is not up and running. We are not ready as far as the infrastructure that we need for gear. When I got here, our volunteers had some gear that was, almost 20 years old, and you're picking it up and it's dry rotting in your hands when you're picking it up. You cannot send people in to fight a fire or work on a fire ground with gear like that. Gear costs money, but we haven't had volunteers in any significant number. So there's no reason to really budget that. If we find that there's an interest, then we could put that back in the budget to get them gear and stuff like that. But it's just, we have to find that happy medium when there's that desire to bring them in. I know when I first got here, Captain Frank and a couple other folks were putting together a recruitment drive to get more interest in the resident program. And it was, pulling teeth would be, put it lightly. There's just not a lot of interest. I guess I am old now, but I don't know if it's a generational thing, but I know there's just not a lot of people in that pool really to pull from. I'd love to put that back together if we could find that, that group of people that would be interested in it. But as it stands right now, there's just not enough. The squeeze is not worth the juice to put that program back together.
Marketing.
Thank you, Chief Gilchrist. I'd love to preserve some of our night for everyone. I'd like to just go around a short statement, start in the same order we went before, Union, if anything you want to.
Yeah, no. Yeah, closing, I think it's pretty clear. I mean, we're operations driven, we're response driven. Seems like these boards are as well. I think you guys are as well, but it seems I think we're putting too much focus on where the dollars are rather than looking at it as a system as a whole and how it benefits everyone in this room. If we have a house fire, if we have MBC on the side of the highway, response system we currently have in place is just way better than stepping back. If we're only looking at an old Fitch study with outdated numbers as our frame of reference, I just think we're making a mistake to the folks we serve.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much how we feel.
Thank you, Frank. Wesley?
My question would be is, what is the outlook or the plan going forward for an executive director? Because it looks like this is a ship without a captain. And that's gonna have to be filled. There's somebody that gathers all this in, corrals all this questions, a lot of good discussion tonight.
Yeah.
And we start coming up with answers to solve this, so it's a benefit to the entire community.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Deck. That's a great question. You know, I was a wilderness EMT at one point, and I remember the first thing you do when you're is make sure it's safe and protect yourself before you can help someone else. I've got 14 vacancies, and I've got 3 department heads that are vacant. So I got to focus on protecting the city of Sandpoint first, but I'm working on it many hours a week, and I think that's a great suggestion people made today. So thank you. Daigle.
The only comment I have is, I think just to reply, and I shared it with a few people, but when I first started going to JPA meetings, those were chaired by an independent party hired by a local engineer, and only he was paid for the amount of time he was in the meeting plus the prep time. And so we don't have to hire a person, we can hire a service and have someone, an independent party, to chair that meeting. It was working. But I think you know why it went away.
Yeah. Yeah. I do.
My only comment is I really appreciate, I learned so much just sitting at this table and hearing the questions and the different, I mean, my first question was sliders, you know, what are we even talking about? So, I mean, there's just a lot of depth to every single element of this conversation. I appreciate this evening.
Yeah, because to me, slider's a hamburger.
Yeah.
I know. I know.
In my defense, I am the one that came up with that name because I do like sliders. I think they're delicious. And like
Yeah,
cheese.
on the 70 slide.
Moving forward, I know we have the extension of the agreement with the union extension. I'm not sure, it's been a busy day where all those sit right now. I know Sandpoint Council is gonna look at extending the term at their February 7th meeting. I suspect that the council members have a lot to digest, some more questions and thought to give to the subject. I wouldn't expect any action happening before the 21st of February. And on behalf of the council, I'll let you all speak, but thank you, everyone. I've learned a lot. I know I'm new and a bit ignorant to all this, so thanks for educating me. Thanks for letting me ask, you know, honest questions and good responses. With that, council members, anyone want to say anything before I wrap this meeting up?
I would just say it sounds like present a budget and see what happens, see what we get to help human resources. And I appreciate the camaraderie, the cohesiveness of the group, and I would hate to see that marred by money, I guess. It's my only comment. And they're open to things, so that's why we're here.
Thank you, Councilwoman Duquette. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've, you know, I'm also learning a lot about how all this works, and every time I dig in, I realize it goes even deeper than I thought. But I'm also, really immersed and, there are some things that I would like to revisit in that agreement, but I think that it's possibly, I think that it's overcomable and, I think that oftentimes people look at costs as variable, but more often they move in steps, and maybe we're just at one of those steps where we have to make a bigger leap than just a few more dollars, but obviously there's some issues that need to be overcome, but I think if we put our heads together, we can get there.
Councilman Wilbur?
Yeah.
I guess with that, I think it would be helpful for the council. There's been a lot of talk about a levy, levies, even something informal, scratch it on paper, give us a timeline, a vision, a dollar amount. So we can have something that at least gives us something to grasp onto.
We
With
can
that-
do that.
With that,
No,
Freakin-
keep on your comments real quick.
Oh, no,
All I
that's-
was gonna say, I think that's a great suggestion, Mayor, so you can actually see the vision forward from your, neighboring districts. I wanted to mention that, I do have a draft, Joint Powers Authority that Ron Stocking, came up with. That was vetted by the city attorney, Scott Campbell, that actually never got to council's approval because just never did because of some other administration. So I'd like to share that with you, just so you can at least look at that. Obviously, I think, Counselor Rule pointed out a good thing, like, we've been here for 10 years, like, what's happening? Why hasn't it gone anywhere? We feel the same way. A lot of that's just been, Stocking actually had the leadership to get it done. He wasn't able to because, point blank, the city administrator and him didn't work very well, so that's why he left that post. Since then, our new chiefs have just been under that leadership potentially, and maybe that is why it hasn't gotten done. But I think rather than 1 foot in, 1 foot out, which has kind of been the feeling we've gotten, if we decide to stay together, because obviously the operations response kind of support themselves, I think we should look at a way where we're fully committed for a year or 2 years, because I think it would run way better. And the administrative side of it, the fiscal side of it would probably get solved if it was run as authority. I know that's a big step from the city of Sandpoint, but everything you heard from this room, from the firefighter side, as far as operations and response and service that would give to the public, is better as it is now. And we'll stand by that. So.
Sounds like another workshop.
Well, it does sound like another workshop. So I mean, there's a lot of big decisions rather than just, hey, we had one good workshop. We leave it up to your guys' decision-making, whether we stay together or not. I feel like that's a pretty big decision that, I mean, if you guys feel like you got enough out of this workshop to make that, that's great. I would like to see probably another workshop with that document presented so we can discuss that.
I would just, following on that, I mean, let's say on February 21st, we are called to make a decision about this, whether to remain in JPA. Definitely more workshops would be needed because that decision will be contingent upon our ability to fix this over the next year. You know,
Yeah.
we've identified the problems very clearly tonight.
Yeah.
We haven't solved any of them.
No.
So we're eager to hear what the districts propose in terms of levies and how they can help solve some of the problems. I think the quote I'm going to take away from tonight is that everything comes down to staffing. If we can solve that through levies, then the slider problem goes away. You know, we can achieve minimum staffing without having to shuffle resources around, creating administrative work and HR nightmares for city staff and reduce that burden, hopefully. So yeah, more workshops will definitely be in order, but we got to see what council decides next month.
So with that, I was going to entertain a motion to adjourn unless you.
Mr. Mayor, can I say one thing before we kick out? Oh, Jeb, go ahead. I mean, you got it.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment, to concur with Jason in some ways, but also to speak to what Mr. Woodward has said, that we have to think of it more as one thing. But again, I've been here a long time and I'm not gonna buy that it all falls on a former employee who will remain unnamed as to why the JPA hasn't become an authority. I think a lot of that lies within the firefighters themselves, and I haven't seen that energetic person. I haven't seen that person running forward with the torch and making it their life's goal to turn this into a joint powers authority. And with every organization and board, as we all know, you got a lot of people chatting and everybody coming up with ideas, but you gotta have that one person who has the passion to get it done. And I've waited for a long time for that. So if this meeting sparks the fire under that individual, I'm gonna be very excited to see that happen.
Thank you, Councilwoman Roll. Chief Gilchrist, one last
Yeah,
thing.
I just had one last thing to say before we
Last.
left it out tonight. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come in tonight. I know that when we started talking about just the sequencing of the JPA, our JPA agreement, that doesn't even make sense. Our joint powers agreement, being out of sequence with labor negotiations that were coming up. And it just kind of sparked some conversations at the JPA meetings. It sparks conversations that kind of went into that high-level staffing study. That also sparked other questions. But I know that up until we got to that November, December timeframe, nothing like this was ever even discussed. To be able to come in and sit down and talk, get everybody together. I think this was very helpful. I'd like to thank our crews for showing up tonight. You cannot deny the passion that our crews have for their job. They do a fantastic job of what they have. I know that they want more. I'd love to give them more. But I get, a lot of these folks can't turn off being a firefighter when they leave for the day. They're, their whole time off, they're thinking about what am I gonna be doing next shift. I think we had a pretty good I'm not gonna say animated, but a very good sermon tonight from Captain Frechette about that. But I just think it kind of, shows how everybody's able to come together and at least talk about it, get stuff out on the table. If this is going to work, how do we make it more effective, more efficient? Maybe some of the stuff that's in there is dated. Maybe it's not relevant anymore. Maybe it's just a major overhaul of what has to be done. But the joint powers agreement in and of itself was designed to be reviewed at the end of otherwise it wouldn't have an expiration date, right? So it's designed to be reviewed and either renewed or, figure out a new path to take. So I'm glad to see that we did this because prior to November, there was no plan to put this together. This was just going to be here we go kind of a thing, and let it fall where it may. But I just want to thank everybody for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chief. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Welker, second by Dick. All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Yep.